Well, the last mission was my last half mission. You know, it's one of those that you never wanted to fly. It was a real flying cliche. It was the day we were scheduled to go home, 18th of December, 1972. And on the 15th of December, our rotation was suspended, and we were notified that nobody would be leaving, and they didn't tell us why. But every airplane that landed was being refueled and rearmed, and so we knew it was going to be big. We came in on that Monday morning and were told our target was going to be a railroad yard in the northeast part of the city of Hanoi, and it was an operation called Linebacker 2, which was known over here as the Christmas bombing of Hanoi. Surface-to-air missiles were everywhere. Hanoi probably had as many surface-to-air missiles surrounding it in defense as Moscow, Russia, did. So it's going to be a very, very dangerous mission. About 90 B-52s would be involved in the strike that night, starting around sundown, and in three major hits. The first one that we were assigned to was shortly after sundown, then there would be another one around midnight and another one just before dawn. B-52s coming out of Thailand would go in first, and then the ones from Guam would join up behind them as we got over to the theater and come in behind them against the targets. This route structure was to come across the Pacific. We would refuel coming in, not much, 10 or 15,000 pounds of fuel going in, so we'd have enough to get all the way back to Guam, and then cross into South Vietnam below the demilitarized zone, cross over the border over Laos, and then fly north on the western edge of North Vietnam, the eastern edge of Laos, along that border until we were about 40 miles south of the China border, and then angle around from the west over towards to the east towards Hanoi, and then the final strike would come in from the northwest against a target in the northeast corner of the city, which was a railroad yard in our case. And that was supposedly going to give us the least amount of exposure to known surface-to-air missile sites. There were several problems with that whole idea that I'll get to later. But on the way over, we ran into a number of small issues, starting with on taxi out, as we were waiting in line for takeoff, there was a small earthquake tremor on Guam, which was not a good sign. And then somebody in the line in front of us, we were going to be the 21st airplane taking off out of Guam. And somebody up front had a broken airplane, and so they were changing airplanes and then moving to the back of the strike, and so we moved up to the 20th airplane. And then as we started our takeoff roll, somebody had aborted in front of us, so we moved up to the 19th airplane, which was okay. It meant we were going to be what we call a wave lead of the third wave. A wave was 3 cells, a cell's 3 airplanes, so a wave included 9 B-52s, and so we were the 19th, so we were bringing up the third wave. And I would be the lead navigator, which was fine with me because I figured I was better than everybody else anyway. Everybody thought that about themselves, but and we were, as I said, we were an all-instructor crew. We were dual-seat qualified. We were a very highly competent crew. So as we took off, the next thing that happened was, as we were climbing out, the airplane would not pressurize. And the bombardier and I pulled out our operations manual, repair manuals, looked up potential problems. He found 2 problems, got them both fixed, the airplane pressurized. So then we climbed on out and flew the mission. We had a bit of trouble with the refueling rendezvous because there were 2 refueling tankers out there that were carrying the same beacon code, and both navigators responded to my orders to turn their beacons off and back on, and we rendezvoused actually with the wrong airplane and then had to get to the right one, which caused a little havoc. As we got over Laos, we had been at 5 mile separation between airplanes, and we were going to compress down to 1. And the 2 cells that we were leading behind us discovered at that point that the flight planners had put them at this compression point at the same time and the same altitude. Fortunately, they discovered it before they had any mid-airs, but there were some concerns about making sure that the flight planners knew that when we got back, so that wouldn't happen again. The final issue that we had was, as we started the bomb run, we entered a jet stream with a 90-knot tailwind, which was good news because it would make us go faster. The bad news was that at the bomb release point, it called for us to make a steep right-hand turn of about 120 degrees. And that meant we would lose 180 knots of ground speed because we'd go from tail being pushed by the jet stream to going nose into it and have to slow and be slowed down. And by the steep turn would also cause all of our electronic countermeasure antennas to be blanked out and would expose us to enemy radar. So that was a anxiety producing issue for the crews. We didn't like it. We were under orders not to take evasive action from initial aiming point to the bomb's release point, and so if surface-to-air missiles came after us, we were just supposed to pray that they wouldn't hit us. Fortunately, in the black hole, I couldn't see out, but there were so many SAM calls that I had to turn off my outside radios so I could hear the bombardier, and the bombardier could hear me as we ran checklists into the target.
And so at the time you're approaching the target, how many airplanes are in your immediate flight group there?
27. At 1 mile intervals, sort of like a long elephant walk. So as we came in on the target, we were using our own bombing systems, internal bombing systems, and the bombardier had identified the target. I'd certified that he got it right. That we had offset aiming points. We could actually move the crosshairs over here and bomb over there. We had 2 offset aiming points, and there were strong radar returns. So all 3 returns, the target and both offsets, showed well, and there was no drift in the crosshairs. And we were checking the time. After 8 hours and 40 minutes of flying, we were going to be precisely to the second on time when those bombs touched the ground. So I was pretty proud of my capabilities as a navigator to be able to do that with all the other things we'd had to work with. And it was clear that we had a good system. At 15 seconds to go on the bomb run, the bombardier opens the bomb bay doors. And at 10 seconds, I started stopwatch as backup in case anything went wrong. And about a second later, the radar shut off. And at first I was thinking, an electrical failure now, and I'm ready to do a countdown when the co-pilot started yelling on the intercom, they've got the pilot, they've got the pilot. And I thought, what's that mean? And then the EW, the electronic warfare officer, was shouting, is anybody alive? And I realized we'd been hit by a surface-to-air missile. Surface-air missiles the missile doesn't hit the airplane. It blows up, and it's like a shotgun shell with all this debris. The shrapnel from the exploded missile comes at you at 1,800 feet per second. It's everywhere. And if a jet engine sucks up a piece of metal, it'll break the blades off and then shred out the engine. You lose the engine. If it punctures a fuel cell, it's hot, so it'll start a fire. It apparently had ripped into the airplane and had mortally wounded the pilot and the gunner. I looked over my left shoulder, and there's a bulkhead door behind the navigator's position that leads into the forward wheel well, and then there's a catwalk that goes to the bomb bay. And then when I looked over to the porthole in that door, I could see we had fire. And by then we were just short of the target, and I turned to the bombardier and said, drop the bombs. Just get them out of here. because I was thinking, I don't need fire in front of all those 750-pound bombs back there. And he jettisoned the bombs out, and I realized that that fire was right below the main mid-body fuel tank above the wheel well, and it holds about 10,000 pounds of jet fuel. So we have this Bunsen burner burning back there, fixing to light off this fuel, and just as that happened, the EW ejected. The pilot was still alive, but ordered the rest of us to eject. So I got into position, cleared my desk, stowed the desk, got all my navigator charts and equipment, and threw them way as far in the back of the airplane as I could, so that when I ejected, it wouldn't come in and pound against me. Kicked back in the leg restraints, reached down, I cinched up my oxygen mask, pulled the oxygen, what we call a green apple, little green knob to start a flow of oxygen, reached down, grabbed the handle, and I grabbed them incorrectly with my hands faced this way. So that and as I started to pull, I realized that if I continued that pull, then my elbows would extend beyond the edge of the seat, and when I ejected, my arms would get ripped off. So all that came back in a flash, and I let go, and I turned my hands around so it'd pull up this way, which would keep my elbows tucked in. And initially thought the seat had failed because it moved what appeared to be very slowly. I knew from studying the system that it would take 1/10 of a second to clear the airplane. But I was watching my radar set and panels moving up at a fairly slow speed. And I was thinking, oh, great. It's going to get hung up on the rails. I'm going to be out in the airstream and get beaten to death. I'm going to die. But next thing I knew, I was tumbling it through space. Airplane, the seat had worked as advertised. It took 1/10 of a second. It's just that it's like movies when they show car crashes in slow motion. They don't really happen in slow motion, but that's what it seems like when you're involved in them. So cleared the airplane, the seat worked and kicked me out of it. We were at 35,000 feet. It's 55 degrees below 0 centigrade at that altitude, and we were at the bomb release point. 18 B-52s had dropped bombs in that target at that same point in the sky, and 8 more were going to within the next minute and 45 seconds. And it would take 2 minutes for me to free fall to 15,000 feet where the parachute opened. So the entire time I was tumbling, first I was tumbling, it seemed like around all 3 axes, and it took me a minute or so to get stabilized in the fall. And I was more concerned at that point about getting stabilized before the parachute opened, so that when it did open, it wouldn't just wrap around me and I'd hit the ground like a balled up cocoon. So I got stabilized in the fall. The parachute opened passing 15,000 feet. I was initially swinging like a pendulum and had to make what we call a 4-line cut. Had a daisy chain strap I pulled on, and that released 4 of the 4 lines on the parachute, create a little spillway to stabilize. So I was about 14,000 feet by then, and so I looked down between my combat boots. I was hanging right over the target and saw the last 27 bombs blowing up as they walked their way through the target. I thought, oh, great. Eject, get a good parachute, land in the fire. This is not good.